Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing part 185 of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people are making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we've actually got quite an interesting assortment. We've got quite a few extinct animals. We've got some critically endangered ones as well, or like extinct in the wild. We got one there. And a couple other modern species, which I'm actually quite excited to get stuck into. So we're going to be starting off today. This is done by Great Cakes Mods. One of the biggest modders around, at the moment. We have got the White-Bellied spider monkey. This is quite a nice one. Let's have a look. Oh, there's one posing right now. Let's have a look at that one. Let's have a look on the camera. So look at that pose. This is actually a custom animation before you're curious about that. So the white-bellied spider monkey, or Attalus beelzebuth, is also known as the white-fronted or long-haired spider monkey. They're an endangered species of New World monkey, and a type of New World monkey, type of spider monkey. They are found in the northwestern Amazon, in Colombia, Ecuador, Venezuela, Peru, and Brazil, ranging as far south as the lower Uruguay River, and as far east as the Branco River. Though in the past, the Peruvian brown and white-cheeked spider monkey had been treated as subspecies, they've all been kind of split, and now is considered monotypic. So, you can see they have a whitish belly, where they get the name the white belly, and a pale patch on the forehead, despite their common name, is often an orange buff colour. Though this might be due to dirt and other stainers. And they typically live in groups of about 20 to 40 individuals, splitting into small parties of 1 to 9 when active. So we'll go into a little bit why they're endangered soon. But their ecology, they're actually quite important for the ecology of the Amazon. They are a seed disperser. So they disperse seeds of many different types of fruit. And they're the dominant disperser of Orenocarpus batula, which is a species of palm, which is quite interesting. They live in a social group that operates in fusion-fission dynamics, so there'll be a bunch of them. Now, groups will change and grow and shrink all the time. That's kind of what they know. That's great fluidity. And it changes a lot. It can be fragmented when they travel, and They actually go into subgroups when they're hanging around and feeding and sleeping together, and often changes several times a day. There'll just be more or less. And the composition of these groups can also be influenced by the reproductive status. But females with dependent offspring are more likely to join a large group than those without dependent offspring. And females will usually remain in a small core range within their home territories, or males will utilize a bit more of their home range, which is quite cool, and they can travel up to about 1 kilometre away. That's not what we wanted to look at. We'll have a look at one climbing on the mesh there. I thought there was one climbing on the mesh there. It's alright, we'll carry on. I've got one of the girls. And there's no evidence of secondary dispersal in wild spider monkeys, therefore mostly the males in the group are closely related to each other, so typically the females will go off and do their thing, which is interesting. White-bellied spider monkeys are believed to attain sexual maturity about 4 to 5 years old and will produce a single offspring, although females giving birth to twins has been reported. And the gestation period is between 226 and 232 days. Copulation is initiated typically by females, and the pattern of greater female mate choice in other spider monkeys is believed to reduce aggression in males, especially since they're living so close together. Males have been often observed engaging in infanticide, and all victims of observed infanticide were from the same social group as their attackers, and all were young males, so that seems to be kind of a common thing. In terms of their diet, the diet of the white-bellied spider monkey is typically about 83% mature fruits, and they're important for this, as I mentioned, seed dispersers for many fruiting species. They carry a relatively high number of intact seeds in their gut, and then they move them on when they poop them out. They're also likely to return to previous food sources and spend relatively little time foraging. They are a generalist frugivore, so they eat a lot of fruits and things, and don't specialize in a particular fruit. but they do seem to prefer fruits with high lipid contents, high sugar contents, or fruits produced by trees with high fruit productivity. So basically, fatty, sugary, or make a lot of them. They will also feed on other parts of the plant, including leaves, flowers, and buds, and will often very rarely consume small insects. And they've also been recorded to partake in geophagy, basically eating rocks and things. And spider monkeys, in terms of locomotion, we'll look at the baby when we get a chance. Look at this little cutie. Locomotion, they tend to be semi-brachiators. So they're brachiators, animals that use their arms to swing and climb. They seem to be semi-brachiators, so they don't just use their arms to climb, though they have a little bit more flexible scapulars or flexible shoulders to allow them to climb, but they're not as good as orangutans or gibbons. They have a gripping pad on the end of their tail that allows them to climb. I'll have a look at this one running up here. Come on. We'll have a look, because I like watching that. That's cool. Anyway, they have that gripping pad at the end of their tail for locomotion, and they actually use it to hang off like that. They use it as a fifth limb. It's quite interesting. They use it to grab on branches and things like that. And it's often compared to a finger, showing that it allows help with gripping. And the curved hands on the long metacarpal bones, so they've got long fingers that are curved that allow them to easily brachiate. And they also do not have a thumb, which makes them different from most other primates. So that's another really cool thing. A lot of spider monkeys have that. Yeah, we'll just have a little look while he's doing that. Really, really cool. Do another Great Cakes mod. Next one is not done by Great Cakes mod, but most of the other ones are. We've got this one is done by Leaf. We have got the bearded seal. So let's have a look at the bearded seal. A really, really cool one here. So the bearded seal, or Eriganus barbatus, also known as the square flipper seal. They're a medium-sized pinniped found in the Arctic Ocean, and they get their generic name from the two words erigathos, which means heavy jaw, and their other name barbatus means bearded, which is one of their most characteristic features. They have very abundant and very conspicuous whiskers that can, and when dry, they actually tend to curl up and give them like a raffish look in their beards. So bearded seals are the largest northern species of fauconid. They have been found to weigh as much as 300 kilograms, with females being the largest. However, males and females are not very sexually dimorphic, so they tend to be about the same size. They're the only member of their genus, and they are unique is that they're an intermediate. Bearded seals belong to the family Fauconidae that includes two subfamilies, Fauconidae and Monarchidae, and the bearded seals actually possesses characteristics of both these subfamilies, so which is quite interesting. So Fauconidae is things such as the northern seals, so things like hooded seals as well, and then the southern seals are all the ones that you find, of course, like down the south, or of course the southern seals, so things like leopard seals and stuff like that. It's another great way to describe them. So, and we'll get to a bit of paleontology as well. It's actually quite interesting there. Distinctive features of the airless seal actually has the square foreflippers and the thick bristles on its muzzle. As you can probably see there, you can see there's very square flippers and there's very fluffy whiskers. Adults seem to be a greyish brown in colour, darker on the back, really with a few faint spots on the dark, or both dark spots on the side. Occasionally their face and neck can be reddish brown, and their pups tend to be born with a greyish-brown natal fur, with scattered patches of white on their head. And they're actually quite unique in their family, as they have two pairs of teats, which is a trait that's also shared with monk seals. In terms of size, they get to between 2.1 and 2.7 metres, or about 6.9 to 8.9 feet long, and can weigh between 200 to 430 kilograms, or 441 to 948 pounds, with the females being larger than the males. So that makes them sexually dimorphic, but not hugely so. And bearded seals, along with ring seals, actually tend to be quite common food sources, major food source for the polar bear. They're also hunted by the Inuit as well. And the Inuit tend to prefer the ring seal for food and light, as the meat would be in the blubber and burnt. But the bearded seal is tougher, than regular seal, and they're used to make things like shoes, whips, dog sleigh harnesses, and to cover a wooden boat frame, things like that. So that's what they tend to use bearded seal skins for, which is quite interesting. And the body fat content of a bearded seal is actually between 25 and 40%. So in terms of their distribution, they are extant across the Arctic and subantarctic. They extend from the Chicxulub Sea and down south into the Bering Sea, where they span into Bristol Bay on the Alaskan coast and the Sea of Okhotsk and Russia. In the Arctic Ocean, they can be found on the northern coast of Norway, Canada, Alaska, and Russia. It's false-barred as well, so basically northern areas. Although the range typically only extends down to the subantarctic, they've actually been spotted in Japan and China, but also in the Netherlands, Germany, United Kingdom, France, Spain, and Portugal, which is quite cool. Is that one of our male? There's the male. Let's have a look at the female. Okay, so they're primarily benthic, so they tend to hang around the bottom of the ocean. They feed on a variety of small prey found on the ocean floor, including clams, squid, and fish. These whiskers that they have actually serve as feelers in the soft bottom sediments. And they tend to not dive very deep. They tend to prefer more shallow areas near the coast, no more than about 300 meters or 980 feet deep. And pups up to about 1-year-olds, however, they actually will venture to go quite deep, about 450 meters at some point. And a study conducted in the summer months suggests that the seals will feed on invertebrates such as anemones, sea cucumbers, and polychaete worms. And the same study found that scuplins and Arctic cod actually make up most of their summer diet. Now, scuplins tend to be found to be the largest fish these guys consume, and they're actually capable of preying on pelagic and demersal fish in addition to their benthic prey. So they can pretty much hunt most things. We'll have a look at the baby while we talk about the reproductive cycle. That one's an albino, by the way. We just put that around. So look at this little guy go. Look at this little cutie. So, bearded seals give birth in the spring. In the Canadian Arctic, seal pupping occurs in May. And as false-barred, it takes them about 5 to 6 years to reach that age. And further south in Alaska, most pups are born in late April. Pups are born on small drifting ice floes in shallow water, and they usually weigh about 30 to 40 kilograms when born, or 66 to 88 pounds. They enter the water only hours after being born, and are quite proficient divers. Mothers take care of the pups for about 18 to 24 days, where they'll grow to be about 3.3 kilograms or 7 pounds a day, and they'll consume 8 liters or about 2.1 US gallons of milk a day. And by the time they're weaned, they have grown to about 100 kilograms. Though just before they are weaned, a new mating cycle takes place, so females will ovulate at the end of the lactation period. They will remain close to their pups, ready to defend them, and during the mating season, male seals will look like almost like sing, and emit a low, drawn-out warbling noise as a sort of moan or sigh. The sound may attract females, or may be used to males to proclaim their territory, or their readiness for breeding, and males typically occupy the same areas from one year to the next. And like many Arctic mammals, they actually use a strategy called delayed implantation. So the blastocyst is actually not implanted after 2 months of fertilization, often only becoming implanted in July, and thus the seal's total gestation period is about 11 months, though the actual active period of it actually developing is about 9 months. So that's another interesting thing they do. Let's see if we can find one in the water. There we are. Which is cool. Natural predators of the bearded seal include things like polar bears, who rely on these seals as its main food source, and also killer whales or orcas will eat them, and then sometimes even overturn ice floes to hunt them. Walruses are also known to eat these seals, mainly as pups, but it's quite rare, and they can live to about 31 years. So you mentioned about the vocalizations. They're actually quite unique, probably because the trachea is actually different than most other North Pacific phonids. The majority of the rings in the trachea are incomplete, have only a membrane at the two ends. And the song of a bearded seal usually consists of a long oscillating trill that can be last a minute and more, followed by a deep moan, and can be repeated frequently. The number of call types can vary on the population, with 4 types being found as full-barred and 11 in the West Canadian Arctic. And the most frequent sounds are trills, moans, and sweeps, and a sweep can be comprised as a short trill. They do produce these trills in late May to late June. The decline in rhythmicity in late May and June. This timeline coincides with the breeding and pupping season, which is April and May. And this leads them to researchers to conclude that it's believed to be because of their breeding and tied to breeding. Males use these sounds to establish mating territories or their fitness, but it's likely that females produce these sounds as well. Underwater, bearded seal trills can be heard for over 30 kilometers, and some types of sounds traveling farther than others. It makes it possible for animals to communicate with another animal that is far away, although acoustic degradation does occur as the sound passes through the environment. A seal must produce a trill with a sound pressure of at least 100 decibels at 1 meter in order for the sound to propagate 30 kilometers, meaning that bearded seal likely produce sounds at this level. So it is quite powerful sounds. And we'll talk about their conservation status a little bit as well. They are in review under the US Endangered Species Act, determine if they are warranted listing, but the IUCN just deems them as least concern. This classification was determined as a stable population, variant factors, so basically they can conclude that they're doing quite well. But this could change because, loss of sea ice, because of climate change, bycatch, commercial fishing and hunting is also a big thing. So that can cause potential big declines in the future with more climate change, things like that. And there's two different subspecies, there's the eastern and the western, though there have been, validity has been questioned, there's no molecular data supporting that. And a little bit on their fossil history, which I think is quite cool, We have a little bit of a paleo channel here, we've got a lot of paleo animals today, let's talk about that. So bearded seal fossils have been found to be as old as the early to mid-Pleistocene, and these fossils can be found in England, Alaska, and Sweden, as well as the Chaplin and North Sea. And bearded seals, like all true seals, belong to the family Phaconidae, which is one of the three species of pinnipeds. Pinnipeds were thought to have originated about 27 to 25 million years ago during the late Oligocene, and one hypothesis is the evolution of pinnipeds is that pinnipeds are a diphyletic group with autarids and opidonids being mostly closely related to bears, and phaconids being more related to mustelids like weasels. But this has actually been another hypothesis suggests that they're a monophyletic group, and this has been more supported by genetics, so they are more likely to be, related to each other, those types of seals, and not one descending from bears and one descending from mustelids. And bearded seals belong to the subfamily Phaconidae, which is northern hemisphere seals, and they can be divided into the hooded seals, bearded seals, and all remaining genera. And then that's what we kind of know. And bearded seals are the sister taxa to the common ancestors of Stephani and Macaloni. But during the Pleistocene, believe it or not, they could actually be found as far south as South Carolina, which suggests, probably the conditions, there was lots of sea ice and things they could, swim around and deal with down there. So that's quite cool. That's the bearded seal done. Quite cool. It was done by Leaf, another good one. So next up, we've got Great Cakes Mod, who's actually done two different species that I thought I'd combine because they are the same genera. So we'll have a talk about them each as genera, and then we'll talk about the different species. So this is Machairodus, which means knife tooth. These guys are large species of macrodont, or sabertooth cat, that lived in the Africa, Eurasia, and North America during the Middle Late Miocene for about 12.5 to 5.5 million years ago. And they are the species where the family Machaerodontidae gets its name. Some species, it actually got quite big, and this, as we mentioned, we're going to talk about a little bit different species. And they're currently usually placed as one of the most primitive members of the tribe Homotheridae, and the ancestor of the late members of the tribe. So Machairodus was first named in 1832 by German naturalist Johann Jakob Kamp, and though the remains, it was believed by George Cuvier to be a species of bear, which is also now known as Megatherium, based on different teeth from different countries and things like that. But a lot of them have been lumped and split, and things like Staminospilus, which I covered before, Homotherium, Amphimachairodus, Paramachairodus, and Ravis, things like that, all kind of split up. But yeah, there's quite a few species at the moment described. There's about 5, and though a couple could be split, as we'll get into. Some of the most important fossils of Machairodus come from Spain, and I believe this is where Amphilotus comes from. So the fossil species assigned to the genus is Machairodus, is described in terms, so it's like kind of the North American and the Eurasian ones, like a grade. So this is one of the earlier ones. So this is Amphithesis, and the North American Nimravus capticos, which I believe you say that originally. And M. giganteus and Colodoensis are more derived, but there's been a lot of confusion within that. Taxonomy is kind of really weird. So this species here is Amphithesis, which is the type species. So this is the species when you refer to Machairodus. This is the genus that defines that the species that defines that genus. So this species is known from the Mediterranean and like Miocene, and it was tiger-like in size and skeletal proportions, and with a mass of between 100 kilos to 240 kilos, between 220 to 530 pounds. And it was similar to the related Nimraves in North America. And the skeleton preserved actually shows it may have had good jumping skills, which is quite interesting. So Machairodus actually is believed to be a ambush predator, with its legs being too short to sustain long chases, though it's most likely a good jumper. Its teeth were rooted in its mouth and were as delicate as those of some other related genera, unlike most sabertooths and nimravus at the time. It had extremely long canines that hang out from their mouths. But it was actually more easy to fit in their mouths, and they wouldn't have to worry about it breaking as much. Studies of Machairodus indicate that these guys relied a lot on their neck muscles to make the killing bite apply to their victims, with the cervical vertebrae showing clear adaptations to making vertical motions in the neck and skull. And these are clear adaptations for precise movements, strength and flexibility, and the neck that show that they were kind of using these canine shearing bites that they believed to have performed as well. And we'll talk about this other species. We'll talk about Amphithesis next, but it's estimated that 136 kilo or 300 pound of this species would have had a bite force of about 1,077 newtons, so it would have been quite cool. In terms of social behavior as well, there's actually pathologies from the species as well. They're from the Bathalones, with high percentages of tooth breakages. That unlike a lot of later Machairodonts, these guys, due to a lack of producing incisors to use as sort of prey, they were actually more of a risky strategy for them. So they often have broken incisors or broken, canines. There's also fossils that have a lot of paleopathologies and include calcuses and either a tumor of osteomyelitis, so a lot of bone issues and things like that. And in terms of social behavior, M. Amphithesis is actually believed to have a high degree of sexual dimorphism, similar to those of lions and leopards, with males being larger than females. That suggests an increased form of competition and low tolerance among males. Their high levels of sexual dimorphism would also suggest territories of males that would never overlap. And the authors concluded that due to the solitary behavior being common among modern felids, it's more reasonable to assume, because really lions are the only ones, but it's more reasonable to assume that they were solitary, because most modern cats, except lions, are solitary. Though there's a 2024 paper that actually looked at some more different pathologies that suggest severe injuries such as broken mandibles may have been evidence of some social structure, and this is further supported with modern-day felids. Solitary felids have high levels of sexual dimorphism, such as leopards tend to die before their injuries heal, as they're not tolerated in the same territories as other leopards, even if they relied on carrion, if it wasn't abundant in modern ecosystems. However, lions, they have a greater chance of survival because they live in prides. So considering the high level of sexual dimorphism in the species of Machairodus, would likely indicate high levels of intolerance to other individuals within its territory, though unlike lions, they wouldn't have formed prides as they lived in wooded areas in contrast to open landscapes. Instead, M. Amphithesis may have actually formed coalitions of two or more individuals that protect a large area, including territories of multiple females, as unknown as this applies to other species within the genus. So basically things kind of like a cheetah. That's probably the best way to mention it. So this species, as mentioned, from the Serra de la Balanas, Amphithesis is from the Serra de Balones formation, which is kind of, open woodland, and the Valesian age. So these guys would have been a top predator and would have hunted lots of large herbivores. So these large herbivores include horses such as Hipparion, the hornless rhinoceros and Megatherium, the giraffids Decanotherium and Busraboldia, the deer Uroprox and Lucinia, Lots of antelopes, such as Palearus, Tetraprotex, Microtraxeros, Megatherium, the gomphophonid elephantid Tetrapholodon, which is a type of prehistoric elephant, extinct porcupine, Hystrix, and the Seward or pig, Megacerops. And they would have competed for these prey for things like Magicion, and Magicion, which is a bear dog, fellow macaronids, Megatherium and Machairodus, and bears such as Interactus and Angolotherium, the small hyaenid Protectotherium as well. And while they competed a lot with food, with Angolotherium and Megatherium, they likely would have kind of competed a lot with food. Megatherium, Machairodus, and Megatherium were most likely least possible rivals. Evidence also exists that Machairodus may have been prone to niche petitioning with different species as they lived in slightly different habitats, or the Machairodus Megacerops, which is a bear dog, they would have preferred, these guys would have preferred woodlands, while the bear dog would have preferred living in open areas, and dietary preferences may have exist to suggest, like things like, in Africa, we have a lot of large predators, lions, leopards, wild dogs, and things like that. They all kind of prefer different prey and things, and it helps them kind of survive in the same ecosystem. But this species is also found in the Lixian Basin in East Asia during the late Miocene. It would have coexisted with a lot of large carnivores, including two undescribed species of Angolothere bears, the Barbara-felid Albanosmilus, Machairodus, which is another species of Machairodontid, and a huge hyena Dinocorcata. And given their different skull morphologies, they likely would have been more adapted to forest areas, while Machairodus would have actually been adapted to open areas. So that's kind of how they partitioned, living in different habitats, feeding on different things. That's how you have so many large species in an area. So that is the type species of the genus. We've got another one. So this one is Machairodus, I forgot how you say the name, Lashiapup. So this is another cool one. Lashiapup. So this is one that could be its own thing. So that's quite interesting. It is from North America, and it's quite large. Its fossil humerus was about 18 inches or about 46 centimeters. That suggests that it was far larger than a modern lion, which is a 33 centimeter or 13-inch humerus. It was believed to be between 241 and 348 kilograms. With a mean weight of 277 kilograms, with one particularly large specimen which is estimated to actually weigh about 410 kilograms. Until this discovery, there were no true representatives of the genus Machairodus that had been described in North America that had been reassigned to other genera such as Nimravides and Machairodus. Its presence in North America suggests that there was a widespread population of the genus throughout Africa, Eurasia, and North America, or simultaneous instances of independent evolution in Machairodonts on multiple continents during the Miocene. So basically, they all evolved to be very similar, or they're all descended from a common ancestor. It's the chicken or the egg situation. And they do have a quite narrow skull that is compared to the skull of living pantherine cats, with small orbits, with long, thick canines, like a knife, which is interesting as well. So, and according to the prey preferences for this species, would actually would have preferred prey between 413 or 1,386.3 kilograms. So a maximum prey size would be about 1.6 tons. So they actually think that it may have been a large prey specialist. So kind of like a Smilodon, like an early Smilodon. In terms of its habitat, though, it is found in the Hemophilian rocks of the Chalk Hills Formation, Rattlesnake Formation, Macaw Formation, or Gala Formation. And it coexisted with a lot of very interesting Miocene animals, such as Telocerios, Fossiger, or the hippo rhino, Inderactos oregonensis, and Hemolocella vera. So that's a bear and a camel slash llama, or like a prehistoric llama. And it would likely have preyed along these large animals that live alongside, including these rhinoceroses and Homogylocena, which is quite cool. Yeah, there's another cool member of the species. That shows that we got same genus, but quite different, as you can see there. And the babies, they don't really have a baby model, I don't think, but it's still cool to see. Really, really cool. Anyway, that is Machairodus done. So next up, we have got one by Leif and Nicholas Lion Rider. So this one is Megacerops, another really, really cool one. So this is not a rhino, this is a Brontothere. So let's have a look at these guys here. So here's the male. So this means, Megacerops means large horned face. So these are an extinct genus of the prehistoric odd-toed ungulates, or like hoof mammals, so they're related to horse rhinostapias. They are in the family Brontotheridae. They're an extinct group of rhinoceros-like browsers that are actually more related to horses. So it is very interesting to think that they're a rhino, but actually more closely related to horses. They are endemic or only found in North America during the late Eocene, so between 38 to 33 million years ago, and lived for approximately about 4 million years. So Megacerops itself was named by Liddy in 1870, with the type species being Megacerops coloradioensis. And it was synonymized subjectively into Machairodus by Clark and Bibauda in 1967, and then it was assigned to Brontotheridae by Liddy, Carroll, Mader, and different things as well. And includes Megacerops included the species of the genera Machairodus, Brontotherium, Brontops, Menops, and Teledon, and Ornithinotherium. So there is a few different species in there. The type species is so. A lot of other things were named, and they're all been lumped in kind of the two species, the Coloradoensis and Gowanodorhinus. So all the species have a pair of blunt horns on their snouts, with their size varying on the different species. With the horns in males being much longer than those of the female. So you can see that's the male there. The females have a much smaller one. The male's probably more extreme. And this could indicate that they were social animals and used butted heads for breeding privileges. And despite resembling rhinos, they actually were larger than any living rhino, and actually easily approached the size of things like the African forest elephant, which is of course the third largest animal today. It stood about 2.5 meters, or about 8 feet 2 inches at the shoulders, and an overall length, including tail, about 4.6 meters, or about 15 feet long. Its skull itself reached about 89.5 centimeters, or about 35.2 inches, and its greatest length, with some specimens actually possessing substantial canines, so up to 70 millimeters in length. Megacerops actually resembled quite a large rhino and had this large, blunt, Y-shaped horn-like protrusion of its nose, about 43 centimeters in length. Its mass was estimated to be about 3.3 to 3.8 tons, or about 3.6 to 4.2 short tons. And what's also really cool is its dorsal vertebrae had, above the shoulders, had extra long spines, as you kind of see here, that supported the huge neck muscles to carry the heavy skull. And the shape of its teeth actually suggests it would have been a browser, feeding on soft leaves and things, and soft stems, rather than tough vegetation, and would have had fleshy lips and a long tongue to carefully select these foods, kind of more like a modern black rhino, which is another interesting thing as well. So in terms of paleobiology, we actually have a skeleton of adult male that was found with partially healed rib fractures, which supports the theory that males would use their horns to fight each other. So no living creature in the time of Megacerops in time era, except for another Megacerops, would actually be able to inflict this kind of injury. And the breathing movements prevented these fractures from completely healing. And the adults may have used their horns to defend themselves and their calves from predators, from things such as hyenodonts, entelodonts, Bathornis, or nimravids. So quite an interesting amount of prey. And you're going inside her. I'll leave you over there. We'll leave out the cute little baby while we talk about this distribution of these guys. And you can see there's little horns. Very, very cute. So fossils are uncovered in the northern plain states. So life-size models of Megacerops families, male and female juvenile, actually displayed at the James E. Martin Paleontological Research Laboratory, South Dakota School of Mines and Technology, and a different set at the Canadian Museum of Science. Many remains have been found in South Dakota and Nebraska. In the past, specimens are exposed by severe rainstorms, were found by Native Americans, by the Sherlock tribe, and they named them thunder beasts, a name actually preserved by the ancient Greek translation for Brontothere. So that's kind of cool that that kind of worked in, all sorts of different languages. Many of the skeletons found by the Synox actually believed to be herds, which were killed by the volcanic eruptions by the Rocky Mountains, which were actually considered to be active at the time. So that's how they were well preserved and all that good stuff. So yeah, really, really cool to see these guys. Definitely a big fan. So next up, we've got another extinct species. We're going forward in the future and also down to South America. We've got Megatherium. So I'm going to give a disclaimer first. This is supposed to be Megatherium americanum, but it's a bit small to be that species, so we'll actually describe as different species. We'll get into that. So, Megatherium is an extinct genus of ground sloth that is only found in South America and lived from the early Pliocene into the late Pleistocene. And it's best known for being the species best known is Megatherium americanum, which is elephant size, and is primarily known from the Pampas, but range southwards and northmost in Patagonia and Bolivia and during the late Miocene and Pleistocene. There's various other species described. Now, I've already kind of covered this guy before, so I'm not going to go too into much, but as I mentioned, there are a few different species. Not all of them were huge. So Megatherium americanum would have been about 6 meters long and about 4 tons, while some other species could have been comparable in size. But there's species such as Pseudo-Megatherium sundi or Megatherium ubali, which were a little bit smaller, or even the Pliocene Megatherium placanum, which actually was no more than 977 to 1.4 tons, which is probably more comparable in the size of these guys, which is quite interesting. So they are related to things such as like Aromatherium, which is another large species, which we'll cover in the next episode, actually. And what's really interesting about their genetics is that mitochondrial DNA actually suggests that they are more closely related to three-toed sloths, or Bradypus, so the three-toed sloths are their modern relatives, but there are other species, such as the two-toed sloths, are actually more closely related to things like Mylonids, while most other species like the Megatherium, Megalonyx, and Megatherium are actually related to three-toed sloths. So that's another really cool thing about them. The head of Megatherium is actually relatively small compared to its body size and is roundly circular with expanded sinuses and a deep jaws that suggests they would have been actually quite narrow and had an ecology very similar to modern rhinos. Another species is actually distinguished as that the pseudo Megatherium has the fusion of the maxilla and premaxilla, while Megacerops is distinguished by the flat occipital condyles, which is another way to tell them apart if you're quite good at ecology or anatomy. In terms of limbs, there are some difference with other species. In most Megatheriums, tibia and fibia and Megatherium species are fused, with men Enrocarmen and Taberge actually fused together at their distal end, so the closest to the foot. But other species are actually a lot different in the shape and things like that. Because we think of Megatherium, we only think of the big Megatherium, but there's quite a few species described that give a bit different with things and all like that. So Megatherium americanum would have lived during the late Pleistocene in like temperate or arid to semi-arid open habitats, things like that. And it's often suggested it would have been a browser. And there's lots of debate whether they had slow metabolisms, though, however, there's been disputed. And things like, and there's also talk whether they were hairier or really haired or covered in a thick coat of fur. But because of their large size, they may have been actually hairless, because even though they were potentially lower metabolism, they would have been large as well. That retains body heat. So there's a little bit of debate there. Though, isotopes actually suggest the teeth that Megatherium had somewhat lower body temperatures than non-xenarthran mammals, and comparable to those of living tree sloths, and due to their very large sizes, suggested hairless, but because of that, they may have actually had small amounts of fur, but things like Aromatherium may have actually been hairless, depending. And in the Pampas, they would have lived with a few different species, so modern things. That's more to do with like their extinction, things like that, but that's americanum. So this is another species we'll describe and talk about, because it's a bit too small, but we've already talked about the Megatherium a couple times, actually. So I thought I'd leave that and talk about something a little bit different with them. Anyway, this was done by Leaf. Leaf and Nick did the Megacerops, and Giant Ground Sloth was done by Leaf, Nick, and Johnny V. I remember covering this one quite a while ago, and this is, I believe, just remastered a little bit just to make it a bit nicer. It's cool to have a ground sloth that's not just the famous Megatherium. I would be cool if they just changed the name and give us something a little bit different. Yeah, that's cool. Anyway, cool. So next up, we have got another Great Cakes mod. I know I love a Great Cakes mod. We have got the Spix Macaw. So this is another really cool one. So it's elderly. We'll have a look at you. So the Spix macaw, or Sinopsittaca spinxi, or the little blue macaw. These are a species of macaw that are endemic or only found in Brazil. They are a member in the tribe Araneae, which is the neotropical parrots, and part of the family Psittacidae, which is the true parrots. They were first described by German naturalist Greg Margrave, who was working in the state of Paraná, Brazil in 1638, and was named for German naturalist Johann Baptist von Spix, who collected a specimen in 1819 on the bank of the Rio San Francisco in the northern Bahia in Brazil. And we'll get into why these guys are actually quite endangered. We'll get talking to that. So in terms of the taxonomy, as I mentioned, Sinopsittaca, which means blue parrot, which is quite interesting. They are one of the 6 genera of the Central and Southern North American macaws, and they were thought to be related to things like the hyacinth macaw as well, but they're actually quite distant. In terms of their description, they're easily identified because they're the only small blue macaw, and they also have bare grey facial skin and on its lores and eye rings. They are about 56 centimetres, or about 22 inches long, including the tail length of about 26 to 38 centimetres, or 10 to 15 inches. They have a wing length of 24 to 30 centimetres, or about 9 to 11 inches. The external appearance of males and females are pretty much identical. However, the average weight for captive males is about 318 grams, or 11.2 ounces, while females about 288, or about 10 ounces, so a little bit smaller. The plumage you can see is like a grey-blue on the head, pale blue on the underparts, and vivid blue on the underparts, wings, and tail. The legs are kind of a brownish-black, and in adults, the bare facial skin is grey, the beak is entirely dark grey, and the irises are yellow, so you can kind of see that there. Juveniles are similar to the adults, but they have a pale grey facial skin, brown irises, and a white stripe on the top center of their beaks. So in terms of their diets, in the wild, the most common seeds they eat is kind of the pinhano and faliva, and these trees are colonizers, not native to the bird's habitat, and may not be historic staples. But they do feed on quite a few different species of seeds and things like that. So captive bred Sphinx macaws reach sexual maturity at about 7 years of age, and a paired female born at the Laura Parque Fulicon laid eggs at the age of 5, but they were infertile. This is late maturity in captivity may be due to inbreeding, while artificial things, and its other parrots would have been sexual maturity about 2 to 4 years. In the wild, mating involves elaborate courtship rituals, like feeding each other and flying together. This process is known to take several seasons in other large parrots, but this may be the case with the Sphinx. Pismacaw, he's having a good run. So that's a baby there, that's the adults. Is this the baby? Yeah, this is elderly, this is the baby. This must be a baby. Yeah, that's a juvenile. We'll have a look at another one, even though they're just as big as their parents. Look at you. Alright. They make their nest in the hollows of large mature carabiner trees and reuse the nest year after year. Their breeding season is November to March, with most eggs hatching in January to coincide with the start of the Kajana January to April raining season. In the wild, they are believed to lay 3 eggs per clutch. In captivity, average number is about 4 eggs and can raise 1 to 7. Incubation period is about 25 to 28 days, and once the female performs incubation duties, and the chicks fledge in 70 days and are independent in 100 to 130 days. The mating of Sphinx macaw can be described by the sound. The mating call is like a watcha. The sound is actually created by making low rumbles in the abdomen, bringing the sound up to a high pitch. The voice repeated short grating and makes squawking noises. And the lifespan in the wild is unknown. The only documented bird, the last wild male, that's a bit of a teaser for their endangerment, was older than 20 years, and the eldest bird in captivity died at age 34. So in terms of their distribution habitat, various accounts actually relate to they were more common in the Paramaribo than Bahia through the 1960s, but no later. They were most recently found in the Rio San Francisco Valley in northeastern Brazil, and actually some points they were believed to be kind of, endemic to their own found there. Study of the lone bird discovered in Megacerops Crete in 1990 actually revealed a lot of information about the habitat, and much remains uncertain around the original range because most of the woodland habitat was cleared before naturalists observed the bird. The historic range is now believed to encompass portions of the state of Bahia and Benimal in about a 50-kilometer wide corridor, and is actually very difficult to study, which is interesting. So, in terms of its history, I already mentioned a lot of that. So, its decline in the wild, that's something we should probably talk about. So, they were already rare by the time the Sphinx discovered in 1819, following about 100 years of intense burning, logging, and grazing in the area, with centuries of deforestation, human encroachment, and agricultural development around that area, following European colonization into Brazil actually caused their population to decline, with other things including the black rats, feral cats, mongooses, and marmoset monkeys, which prey on the young and eggs, and also goat, sheep, and cattle that destroyed the regeneration growth of the woodland trees. It's believed to have hurt them. The decline of the species in the 1970s and early 80s attributed to hunting and trapping of these birds considered unsustainable, and also the introduction of the Africanized bee is a big thing as well. And the trees grow very slowly, the ones that like to nest in, and they've not seen any regenerative growth in the last 50 years. In addition, 45% of the Canada dry forest is also being cleared for farms and ranches and plantations, so that is a big worry for them. So, let me just quickly put this on. There we go. Analysis of 2018 based on threats, time since last confirmed report, and patterns of birds extinction suggests the bird was all in probability extinct in the wild, and as 2019 they are classified as extinct in the wild, so they were extinct. So very interesting that they were. So this bird has not been studied in the wild until the 1970s and the 80s. There was a few of them collected. A single male actually paired with a female blue-winged macaw, discovered site in 1990. A female macaw released in captivity at the site. Was actually killed by a collision. The last wild male disappeared from the site in October 2000 and marked the last extinction of the wild. However, wild Sphinx macaws have been sighted in 2016, and while the IUCN lists them as critically endangered or possibly extinct in the wild, they do call them kind of extinct in the wild. Though in June 2022, a flock of 8 Sphinx macaws had been released back into the wild. It seemed to be doing well, with the 12 being released December of the same year. So they're finally back in the wild, you could say. So by the mid-1980s, the time field work to locate and understand the habitat was complete. It was apparent they were nearing extinction. So conservationists realized the only way to save the species would have been a captive breeding program. A meeting in 1987 of conservationists actually could only find about 17 captive Sphinx macaws. Without the attendance of most of the captive holders or involvement, little was accomplished. In 1990, there was a group trying to kind of preserve them in order to conserve the species. At the time, the captive population was 15, and early 1990 was a low point for their population. And the permanent committee tried to resolved in 2002 due to irreconcilable differences between the parties, and they tried to reform. There was since 1987 the kind of field program they went to study the last male. And between 2000 and 2003, they were studying them, and then 2 farms they actually kind of bought, and these were small habitats, but they were kind of where the last Sphinx macaws lived. And in May, they've actually bought a lot of areas and stuff to try and help them, but the captive population is kind of what saved them. So the existing captive population actually descended from just 7 wild-caught founder birds, which are believed to all have come from just 2 wild nests that existed post-1982. Pairs originally owned by Birds International in the Philippines, Dr. Hamel in Switzerland, and Wolfgang Kessling in Laura Parquet, and a male from Sao Paulo Zoo. So that's where they're believed to have come from. In the years since 1987, conservationists started tracking these macaws. Only 2 suits of borns were unknown, and a single male was found in Colorado, US in 2002, named Pearsley. There is no evidence that any other not known in 1987 still exists, though there may be a very cryptic reference of a black market dealing with birds. As of 2022, there was approximately 177 Sphinx macaws in captivity, 83 of them being participating in an international breeding program, and most of them managed by the Alawapa Wildlife Preservation, which purchased the population from Birds International and most of these other collections. So they're now kind of localized. And 3 of the 5 conservation organizations, a captive breeding program is guiding Spix macaws a step closer to re-establishment back in its native habitat. And they have loaned individuals to the Yurong Bird Park, which in Singapore, so it'd be a good place to see them. So in terms of their health and reproduction, because they are descended from such a small amount of founders, only 7, they are very few. There's not a lot of genetics, so they tend to be closely related and inbred. And for unknown reasons, originally suspected to be bloodline related. Captive specimens are mentioned to have delayed sexual maturity, so that's interesting as well. All are nearly hatched chicks of the breeding program are hand raised by expert staff to risk the losing a scarce live chick as well, so they're raised by people. And they choose their own mates independently, so best genetic variance is not guaranteed. There's also been efforts to use artificial insemination to artificially inseminate females and kind of collect them as well. In 2013, they actually really tried it and had a good go of it. They actually produced the world's first egg fertilization of first chicks from a Sphinx macaw that had assisted, was artificially inseminated. So that is a cool thing about them. That one's kind of actually just sitting there and just being boring. We'll have a look at another one over here. It's a juvenile. Let's look at this one over here. What's you doing over there? Pretty cool. So there's a lot of effort going into them. And in terms of their reintroduction, in 2018, the population of the species numbered about 158 individuals, and there was an agreement signed to actually try and release them into the wild. And it's a reputation of 50 Sphinx macaws in Brazil by the first quarter of 2019, and they were officially eventually reintroduced in the wild in June and December 2022. So the population is actually included the creation of 2 protected areas in the state of Bahana, the wild refuge of Sphinx macaw. So that's doing quite well there. In August 2018, 146 of the 160 Sphinx macaws in the world lived in the Association for Conservation of Threatened Parrots in Germany. 120 of them came from Qatar, transferred due to the death of the maintainer of the Al Warba Wildlife Preserve. So they actually moved over there. And born in the wild, since April and July 2021, 3 Sphinx macaws have been born in the wild, 20 years after they were declared extinct in the wild, which is interesting. And this chicks come from a couple that came from Germany in 2020, and it's declared the species will be introduced into nature in the next years. 2 more were confirmed to have been born in the wild in late October 2023. Though the pair together could be after being released in captivity from June and December, respectively. So that's really, really cool. All these conservation efforts, and this shows why zoos are really important. They can help species like these. When their habitat is gone, they can breed them and help, kind of foster introduction for them. And they were also quite common in aviculture. So one of the earliest records of a Sphinx macaw in public display was a dramatic display of the 4 blues, and include the Sphinx macaw, the Glaucous macaw, which is another potentially extinct in the wild macaw, the Hyacinth, and the Les macaw in the 1900 in Beale Zoo. They were extremely rare in aviculture, as they were kind of held by wealthy people. The earliest known specimens were 3 held at the London Zoological Society between 1878 and 1902. One of the few accounts of them in captivity was actually found in agricultural London as well. They remain rare and highly coveted, and there is a few, kind of people that have them. They seem to have been intelligent and affectionate, talk some, but have no worse proclivity to screaming than Amazons, and they're actually kind of spiteful to other birds, potentially as well. And there was, in October 2002, a Sphinx named Presley was actually discovered in Colorado and repatriated to Brazil. The Sphinx has not been known until 1987, so they're likely very much extinct in aviculture, which is interesting. So, being so rare and all that. This one's just kind of standing in a pose. I don't know what's going on with that one. We'll see if we can find another one hanging out somewhere. No, that's not what we want. It's elderly. We'll look at this one. That's not the cool one. In a popular culture, they were actually have been in a few movies and things like that. And like Rio is based on the Sphinx macaws, and based off the with Blue and Jewel, they were supposed to be the last pair of Sphinx macaws in the world, even though they're referred to as blue macaws. So that's a reference to them. And they've been also in things like Noah's Island, Born to be Wild episode that ended with Sphinx macaw. In 2008, there was a episode of Wildlife, or Lord of the SUV, There was actually a bird that was included there, and it was actually found the person, the victim, had been mauled by a tiger. So that's quite interesting as well. And there's also, as I mentioned, a potential rediscovery. As 18th of June 2016, there was one specimen found in Urabo, but it was actually identified to be a Sphinx macaw. However, BirdLife noted it's possible that it was a captive release bird. But yeah, that's still cool. Another really cool species. So we're going to let them run off and do their thing. So this was done by Great Cakes Mods, one of the Great Cakes mod. And last but certainly not least, we got a mod by Monsoon. Really excited to talk about this one. We've got a giant eland, it's like an eland, but giant. A really, really cool one here. So the giant eland, also known as Lord Derby's eland or the greater eland, or Taurotargus and Dirabanus, they are a species of open forest and savanna species of antelope in the family Bovidae and in the genus Taurotargus, and was described in 1847 by John Edward Gray, and they are the largest species of antelope in the world, with a body length ranging from 220 to 290 centimeters, or about 7 to 9 feet long, and there are two different subspecies as we'll get into. So in terms of their taxonomy, they are closely related to the common eland and the greater kudu, which is interesting. They're also called the black-necked eland. Giant elands are placed in the genus Taurotragus, and they were considered to be Pterophilus, which is kind of the common eland, but they are now considered to be their own species, or own genus. And sometimes a giant eland is kind of specific with the common eland, but they are typically considered two different species. And there's two different subspecies of them recognized, with the type subspecies Dibranus being found in Western Africa, with Gigas being found in Central and Eastern Africa. So the giant eland, you can see, are kind of a spiral-horned antelope. Despite its common name, the species broadly overlaps inside with the common eland. However, the giant eland is somewhat larger on average, and therefore is thus the largest antelope species in the world. They typically get between 219 to 291 centimeters, or about 7.1 to 9.5 feet, in head-to-body length, and stand approximately 1.28 to 1.81 or 4.2 to 5.9 feet at the shoulders. And they have sexual dimorphism, with the males being much larger than the females, with males weighing between 400 and 1,200 kilograms, or about 880 to 2,650 pounds, while females being between 300 and 600 kilograms, or about 660 to 1,320 pounds. They have long tails and have a dark tuft of hair. They average about 91 centimeters in length, and they have a life expectancy of about 25 years. So the smooth coat you can see is like a reddish brown or chestnut, which is usually darker in males and females, and they have 8 to 12 well-defined stripes going down their body, with the color of the males darkening with age. And it's believed to actually reflect the level of androgen or male hormone, which is high estrogen writing. Is also a small crest of short black hair that extends down the neck, the middle of the back, and is particularly prominent in the shoulders. Their slender legs are slightly larger on the inner surfaces, with the black markings just above their hooves. They have large black spots on their upper forelimbs, or forelegs, and the bridge of their nose is charcoal brown, and there's kind of a lot of dots about their dewlap. They've also got this large dewlap here, larger in males than in females. It originates from the jowls and hangs down here with a fringe of hair. And the large ears of an eland serve as signaling devices, and they have comparatively longer legs compared to the common eland, as well as much brighter backs and black and white patterns on the legs and partisans, which is interesting. And both sexes have these tightly spiraled horns that can be up to about 124 centimeters, or about 4 feet long in males, and 67 centimeters, or about 2.2 feet in females, with males often having horns that are thicker in the ends, longer and more divergent than the females. And these features suggest that giant eland had an ancestor with actually true display horns. So that's quite interesting. So that's the male. So let's look at the female. You can see the difference there. There's quite the large dewlap. So in terms of their distribution, so they live in broadleaf savannas, woodlands, and glades in Central and Western Africa. This goes by the two subspecies. They also do live in forests and things like that. They inhabit lots of hilly, rocky landscapes, things like that, and woodlands, so they live in quite rounded habitats. In the past, they lived in a relatively narrow belt of savanna that extends to West and Central Africa from Senegal to Nile. However, these days they are often more kept and largely restricted in national parks. but they are kept in captivity as well. Some looks into the genetics as well is quite interesting. The giant eland has 21 male chromosomes and 32 female chromosomes. And this is actually kind of seen in cattle and 8 species of spiral and horned antelopes, such as kudu, nyala, bongos, bushbucks, and kudu, which actually just they're closely related. Another really cool thing as well is actually previous genetics studies on African savanna ungulates revealed a presence of a long-standing Pleistocene refugium that in eastern and southern Africa that also included giant eland, and the common and giant eland would be believed to have diverged from each other about 1.6 million years ago. So in terms of their ecology and behavior, these guys are nocturnal. They have large home ranges and separate seasonal migratory patterns. They form separate groups of males and of females and juveniles, with adult males mainly remaining alone, but often spend times with females for an hour to a week. They are a gregarious species. Giant eland herds usually consist of 15 to 25 animals. They do not disband during the wet season, suggesting that social rather ecological factors is their herding as well. But during the day, they often rest in sheltered areas, and they will scrape out mineral licks and try with the help of their horns to loosen the soil. They are quite wary and alert and can be quite difficult to hunt. If a bull senses danger, he will give a deep-throated bark while leaving the herd, repeating the process until the whole herd is aware of danger. Giant elands can also move quite quickly, running at over 70 kilometers an hour or 43 miles per hour, and are quite exceptional jumpers, easily clearing heights of about 1.5 meters. Their primary predators are things like lions, Nile crocodiles, and spotted hyena, with young, sick, or the rare adult may be vulnerable to leopards, cheetahs, and African wild dogs. And due to the large size, they do provide a good meal for predators. However, they are not easy to take down, due to being so large, especially the heavy and large horned bulls, which can be, quite a dangerous adversary. They are primarily herbivores, and they feed on grasses and foliage as well as other parts of the plants. In raining season, they tend to browse in herds and feed on grasses, and at least the coarse, dry grasses, and eat fruits such as plums. Actually, a study in South Africa suggests that their diet consists of about 75% shrubs, 25% grass, and kind of, make up the rest. As they need a regular intake of water, they tend to like living in areas with water sources. However, some adaptations they possess actually help them survive in areas where there's a lack of water by maintaining a sufficient quality of it in its body. They produce a very dry dung compared to domestic cattle, and in deserts they can actually get the required water from the moisture in their succulent plants that they eat. And there's quite a few species that they do like to eat, things like Acacia, Tamamalia, and a few other interesting species as well. So in terms of reproduction, we're going to look at the cute little babies while we talk about their reproduction. So mating occurs throughout the year, but peaks in the wet season. Females reach sexual maturity at about 2 years, and males about 4 to 5. A female is in estrus for about 3 days, and their cycle lasts about 21 to 26 days. As in all antelope, mating occurs at times of food abundance, though it kind of depends where you are. So females in southern Africa give birth to August or October and are joined by the males from late October to January. And in Zambia, they can be born July to August. It depends where you are. Fighting will occur for dominance, with bulls, locking horns and fighting each other. And during an act of rut, the males rub their foreheads in fresh urine or mud. And they also use their horns to thresh and throw loose earth on themselves. The horns of older males get worn out due to rubbing them on tree barks. Expressions of anger are not typically observed. Dominant males may mate with multiple females, but the courtship is being brief. And after the courtship, the gestational period begins. It's about 9 months, and the delivery usually takes place at night, where the mother will actually ingest the afterbirth. Generally, one calf is delivered and remains with its mother for about 6 months. And lactation will last for about 4 to 5 months. And after its first 6 months, the young eland might join a group of other juveniles, which is quite interesting. And there's actually a study that followed on the suckling behavior of giant and common eland calves at about 1 to 5 months. They actually determined that sucking bouts actually increased with the age of the calves. So no other change occurred in farmed common eland calves, but with giant elands, they found to suckle more. Males were found to suckle more than female ones, and shorter suckling bouts, which is marked by proboscis mothers more than multiparous ones, which is quite interesting as well. That actually suggests that the species actually lived in a natural habitat, adjusted their maternal behavior, so they will readily maintain a vigilant lookout for predators, which is interesting as well. So in terms of their population, they can, as I mentioned, range from like Nigeria, Cameroon, and lots of those parts of Africa. Due to the Repper pest outbreak, though, they actually have quite a decline in their population, for about 60-80%. They are still found in extensive areas, though there is a declining population trend, and that is why they are considered vulnerable. They live in mainly uninhabited areas of Western Africa, things like that. There's believed to be 15,000 eastern giant elands in about, as 1999, which about 12,500 were in Central American Republic. And those remaining areas often disturbed by wars and conflicts, with activities that can lead to a rapid decline in their numbers if not controlled. The western eland is actually considered critically endangered. Today they mostly occur in Senegal. Their populations were about 1,000 in 1990, and it actually was gone quite down. And as of 2008, there's less than 2,000 occur there, and only a few elands exist in neighbouring countries. So the study of long-term conservation strategy of the western giant eland has actually been done that suggests that there's a based on, they actually found like a semi-captive population with about 54 individuals. The breeding females probability was about 84%, and the average annual growth population 1.6%. With more populations, they were divided into 5 groups for observation, and they actually kind of find new founders and generally improved, so they actually could, do it with a little bit of captive, semi-captive breeding, so that's quite cool. In terms of the interaction with humans, their major threats seem to be overhunting, and because they are, have quite a rich meat. We'll have a look at the male again. So they're quite a rich meat, and habitat destruction, because often, the lands that they want to eat are often taken up by farmers. The eastern giant eland is also depleting from similar reasons, and the natural causes like droughts and competition for domestic animals is reducing their numbers. And populations of the eastern giant eland have already gone due to ripe pest attacks. So it's a type of, I believe, virus. And the situation was actually worse during World War II, as it was very other civil wars and political conflicts that harmed their habitat. The giant eland has also actually been extirpated from the Gambia, Ghana, Ivory Coast, and Togo. And they eat western. So again, they are hunted for trophies. Their milk is comparatively richer in proteins and milk fat than dairy cows. That may have been an explanation for the quick growth in their calves. And they actually have triple the fat content and twice the protein of a dairy cow's milk. And docility and profitable characteristics made them a target for domestication in Africa and Russia, and has resulted in hunting. So many people prefer to tame and raise eland rather than cattle due to these numerous benefits. They can survive on scarce water, which is a great advantage over domestic cattle. They also eat coarse grasses and can even ingest some poisonous plants that can be fatal to cattle. And they're also some immune to some diseases which they must succumb. So you could become an eland farmer if you really want. There's a lot of benefits to them. So that's really, really cool. And they're a cool species, and another great mod by Monsoon, so I really do love this one. So this has been a longer episode, so I think we'll end it about now. So, I want to thank everyone, thank you Great Cakes Mod, thank you Leaf, thank you Nick, thank you Monsoon, thank you Johnny V, thank you everyone for making some of these really awesome mods. So, I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified below anything. So, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.